Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone, and today I have one bold prediction for every NBA team going into the 2026 NBA season. There's going to be a lot to get through. I went with a wide variety of predictions, and I did try to get bold. So let me know down below in the comments how insane some of these are some of these not even that bold? What's your favorite, least favorite take? What do you think about the prediction for your favorite team? And let me know if you've got a different one. Leave a like, subscribe if you enjoy, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And as always, timestamps to find your favorite team down below in the description. Starting things off with the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm going to say that Paul George is comfortably an all-star again. I think most people expect him to just continue to be washed. I'm not one of those people. I think there is a big-time bounce back in store for Paul George in this Eastern Conference that's lacking some talent that theoretically could make the all-star game in his place. Dame gone, Tatum, Tyrese Haliburton, names like that. And I just think he's going to have a good year. I'm hopeful that they're going to be healthier, giving him more talent to bounce off of. The year prior to last season, he was really good in his final year with Los Angeles. He was an all-star. He was really reliable. I just don't believe that Paul George has poofed into nothingness, has ceased to exist. I don't believe PG is completely washed. Is he as good as he once was? No, I'm not thinking he's going to go out there and be an all-NBA caliber player, but I do think an all-star appearance, at least one more, is still in the cards for Paul George, that he and the Sixers are going to be a lot better, a lot more consistent. We're going to get all-star PG back. I'm just not buying that he's washed yet. For the Milwaukee Bucks, I'm going to say that Giannis leads the league in scoring by 2 or more points per game. I just think this team that's currently constructed is going to require some insane heroics from Giannis to win on a nightly basis, especially against top-tier opponents. And that's going to lead to him having the ball in his hands a ton, especially now that Dame's gone. This is the first time in a long time where Giannis, I don't think, has a real legitimate second option on the team. Like Miles Turner, Kuzma, guys like that can step up every now and again, Bobby Portis, but there's no Chris Middleton, there's no Damian Lillard. Giannis is going to be asked to do basically everything, and I think there is a real world where he goes out there and averages 34, 35, close to it points per game this season, playing great defense, and tries to propel himself to an MVP case. I think he's going to get in those conversations. It's just going to be a matter of if he can win, because I don't think the team's success is going to be there up to the level of some of the other top tier MVP candidates, but scoring wise, Giannis, I think, is going to do it better than anybody else. For the Chicago Bulls, I'm going to say that Matas Buzelis has the second highest point per game total out of anybody on the team, which would be a massive jump because out of guys who were on the team at the end of the year last season, he was 8th behind Kobe White, Vucevic, Josh Giddey, Kevin Huerter, Ayo Dosunmu, Trey Jones, and Patrick Williams. He only put up 8.6 points per game, only shot 6.9 times a night. It's going to require a lot of trust in him, but I think the Bulls down the stretch of the season, at least they should have realized that they've got something there with Matas Buzelis, that this is a team, in my opinion, that has to try and find the guy to go ahead and build around. I'm not saying it's Buzelis. I think it's way too early to try and say that, but I think he's their best bet at the moment, and he's someone as a 6'10 forward with a lot of versatility who should have the ball in his hands an absolute ton, should be given a lot of looks, should be allowed to handle, create for himself as well as others. The end of the season last year, he was phenomenal. Not a lot of people watched the Bulls down the stretch, and I don't blame you if you didn't, but I did, and what I saw from Matas was super, super promising. I think this is a team that's set up to probably have Kobe White be the leading scorer again, and then have Matas Buzelis slot in right behind him with Josh Giddey doing a lot more of playmaking, and Vucevic, I'm not sure he's going to have a monster season quite the way that he did last year, and I also think there's a good chance he's off this team before the end of the year. So yeah, give me Matas Buzelis, let's say maybe around like 15 points a game. Would love to see it. Speaking of scoring for the Cavaliers, I'm going to say that Evan Mobley averages 23 or more points per game. This would be a big jump. This past season, he already took a leap, averaging 18.5, which was 2.3 more than his previous career high back in 2023. I'm thinking he takes about a 4.5 point jump, maybe even up to 5 this season, because really everything we've heard this offseason has kind of centered around Evan Mobley being featured more in this Cavs offense. Donovan Mitchell, he was on a podcast of some kind of being interviewed, and he was basically asked, what they need this season, and he said he's going to tell Evan Mobley, be more aggressive. He's going to say, hey, we need you to do more. He's going to yell at him if he doesn't go out there and score. Kenny Atkinson has said many times that he wants Evan Mobley to do more, to be more aggressive. They further implemented him as a focal point in the offense this past season, but I think it showed in the playoffs they need even more. They need as much Evan Mobley as possible, and I think this is the season to try and really take that next step forward and not just be, a really good regular season team, but try and win a championship. And yeah, I think he and Donovan Mitchell's point totals next season are going to be pretty close. For the Celtics, I'm going to say that this is not the only season that Anthony Simons plays in Boston. It goes against my better judgment. It feels clearly to me like he is a stopgap guy. Of course, he's being paid a lot of money at the moment, is an expiring contract though, so it would make sense that the Celtics let him walk and get this ultimate financial flexibility. But if they could get him back on a somewhat cheaper deal, I feel like he could be pretty dynamic in this system. I am not out on Anthony Simons like some people are. I think a lot of people look at him as this, high-level scoring archetype that has kind of become obsolete in today's NBA. But I think there's more to his game that can be unlocked over here in Boston that I think could lead to great success playing off of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. If they can get a really good defensive big, those two guys plus Derek White are enough to go ahead and make up for his defensive deficiencies, and having that microwave type of pop-off score, I think can make this offense very, very dynamic in a way that it really wasn't this past year in the playoffs when they lost to the New York Knicks. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Simons is only here for this season, or maybe there's a world where he even gets dealt before the year, but I'm going to say, we're going bold. I'm going to say Simons is again in green next year. For the Clippers, the only way to go bold is predict health. So I'm going to say that Kawhi Leonard plays 65 plus games. Last season, he didn't start the season. He was out indefinitely, but once he came back, Kawhi was out there pretty reliably. And I think this year, maybe they continue to rest him because they've got pretty good depth, so he really doesn't have to play 65 games. But I think they want to get him into that rhythm. They want to get this team clicking, have them really cohesive by the time you go into the playoffs. And I think that leads to Kawhi Leonard being out there a lot. There's no injuries as far as we know going into the season, which in and of itself is a big time plus. Maybe his minutes are ticked down a little bit, so he's playing 65 games, but he's only averaging like 31-ish minutes. Not putting too much of a toll because obviously you need him for the playoffs the most. But yeah, let's just go ahead and predict a healthy Kawhi season. If you want to go bold with the Clippers, say that Kawhi is going to be out there somewhat consistently. For the Grizzlies, I'm going to go with the fact that they missed the play-in tournament entirely. So that means 11 seed or lower. And when we get to my full season predictions, I'm probably going to have the Grizzlies in the play-in. But I feel like there is a chance, especially when you consider John Morant's lack of constant availability. He deals with injury. Jaren, that's something that pops up every now and again for him too. A lot of young players you're relying on. I think losing Desmond Bane makes your offense take a big hit. I just don't think this team is going to click the way that some Grizzlies fans might be hoping that it's going to. I don't think they're going to be a bad team. I don't think there are many bad teams at all in this Western Conference. I think it is pretty deep. It's one of the deeper West that I can remember, but I do think the Grizzlies are falling fast behind, especially the top tier teams in the West, never mind even like the middle of the pack teams. I do think they needed a shakeup. I'm just not quite sure that trading away Desmond Bane, who is your most consistent offensive player most nights, is going to be the move that ultimately propels them forward. Rather, I think it leads them taking a big-time hit. For the Atlanta Hawks, I'm going to say that they have 2 All-Stars. Part of this being bold is the fact that would mean Trae Young probably makes an All-Star game, and all the voters seem to hate him for some reason. But I just think this Hawks team is going to be really good. They're going to be a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, like I talked about earlier with Paul George. There's some usual Eastern Conference All-Star candidates who are no longer available for those spots. So yeah, I think Trae Young and Jalen Johnson make it in if I have to make my picks. Maybe there's a crazy world where Porzingis gets his second All-Star appearance. I believe it would only be number 2 for him. But I'm going to go with Jalen Johnson. I think he was right there on the verge last year before injury. I think this is a big year for him and Trae to continue to develop that chemistry, more talent around them, opening up the game, more defensive talent to hide Trae Young a little bit. So maybe he's not being beat up as much because the Hawks are like the 20th defense and they're like, oh, a lot of that's Trae Young. I think he could again be towards the top of the league in assists, over 20 points per game, maybe more efficient. Yeah, Jalen Johnson, Trae Young, I'm going to say they both end up All-Stars. For the Miami Heat, I'm going to say that Bam Adebayo averages a career high points per game. This past year, I went all in on Bam Adebayo stock. I was saying over and over again after the Olympics that this is the year that Bam is going to have a career season, and instead he was super underwhelming, one of his worst seasons in quite a few years. And he turned it around a little bit, but he was especially abysmal to begin the year. I think this season is going to be a bounce back. I think he's going to be a more efficient, back to his usual self. They're going to ask a lot out of him now that Jimmy is fully gone. I just think the weirdness with Jimmy Butler and all the turmoil with Miami ultimately hurt his progression in the way that I felt like it would show up last season. I think he's in a good spot right now. I think the front court of him and Chloe Ware is going to be dynamic. Just allow him to get back to his usual game and hopefully goes out there and has a career year. If he was going to average his most points per game, it would have to be 20.5. That feels very doable for him. For the Charlotte Hornets, I'm going to say that Brandon Miller leads the team in scoring next season. This feels more insane now that I've dug into the stats a little bit after I wrote that take down, because in the 20 games they played together last season, LaMelo and Brandon Miller, LaMelo averaged 30 and Brandon Miller averaged 19.2. So maybe this one's completely insane, but I'm going to go with it anyways. In those games, the team was terrible. Like, they couldn't win, which was the case for the Hornets all of last season, especially dealing with injury. I think there's a world where Charles Lee says, like, hey, LaMelo, we know you can go out there and put up these crazy scoring performances. They're still going to happen, but I think they might need him to kind of take a bit of a step back and be more of a facilitator, set up the offense, get guys in their spots. I feel like they're going to really prioritize Brandon Miller's development this season. After last year, it got completely taken away due to injury. He played like 20 games and then was gone. So I think that combination of factors could lead to a situation where it's like Brandon Miller like 24.5 and LaMelo like 24.2. It's going to be really close. And all likelihood, it's still going to be LaMelo Ball because he shoots a ton. But I'm going to say that Brandon Miller slightly edges him out. I also just think there's a world where Brandon Miller is the overall more efficient scorer this season, which leads to him getting more touches just by virtue of that, and that point per game total rising ahead of LaMelo's, who has never been the most efficient player out there. Not that Brandon Miller is efficient in his very short second season last year, but I think he's got that upside for this season. For the Utah Jazz, I'm going to say that Lauri Markkanen requests a trade. Maybe this is crazy because he just signed a massive contract with them, and it's pretty clear that they weren't going to be good for a while. But I think they're going to be really bad again this season. I feel like there is no really end in sight to this rebuild. It's going to end eventually, but it doesn't feel like it's going to happen soon. Plus, right now, Lowry's playing really well. It just started, but in Eurobasket, as I'm recording this, he just had a great first game. I feel like he's going to get a little bit of taste of that success. Last season, it felt like he just really couldn't put it together, and I think part of that is because he has no real supporting talent over there in Utah. I feel like there are going to start to be talks like, I wish Lowry was on a better team, this and that. And he's going to be like, yeah, I would also like to be on a better team. Hopefully the Jazz also just realized that they probably should have traded Lowry last summer when his value was at an all-time high. Maybe it bounces back and he ends up getting dealt. But yeah, I'm going to say that this is the season where Lowry, even if he doesn't get traded, it becomes known that he kind of wants to end up somewhere else. He wants to be somewhat competitive at some point soon, which isn't going to happen in Utah. Speaking of trades, the Kings, Sabonis, DeRozan, LaVine, all elsewhere by the deadline. I think I might have used this as well in my 10 bold prediction video, but it's just one I feel strongly about. I just think this team is a nightmare. I'm hoping the Kings realize that and deal everybody away. LaVine's value actually is pretty good right now. He had a great last season, assuming he plays somewhere near that caliber this year. I think he actually would have a lot of takers, a lot of very interested teams. Like Zach LaVine is a good player. He's not a bad player, and with that contract now, in the final moments, he's a much more interesting piece to add for teams with salaries to match. DeRozan is still a good player, obviously not making nearly as much as Zach LaVine, so it's an easier to match deal there. And then Domantas Sabonis, he's probably the toughest one to move just because I don't think there's a lot of systems that really make sense for him, but I do think there could be some suitors out there that could be interested in Domantas Sabonis, who continues to put together really good seasons, and I don't think deserves the blame he gets sometimes for the Kings' woes. For the Knicks, I'm going to say that Josh Hart spends most of the season coming off the bench. Tibbs, love Josh Hart. I think Mike Brown will too. He's kind of a player that I think any coach would love because he gives 1,010% and is willing to literally die on the court if it means winning a basketball game. But I think Mike Brown is probably going to look at this team and some of the success they saw last year with the double big lineup in the playoffs, putting Mitchell Robinson at the 5, and the lack of defense combined between Cat and Jalen Brunson. I just think ultimately the double big might be the way to go. I mean, it was very successful with Cat and Gobert in Minnesota, and Mitchell Robinson is not as good as Rudy Gobert, but I think there's a formula for that to go ahead and work. And Josh Hart coming off the bench, I just think makes sense. He's a great energy guy who can grab you a lot of boards, who can still play big minutes if you need him to, who can be in closing lineups. But I think if you bring him off the bench to try and mask some of those defensive issues that you'd otherwise have with him in the starting lineup, I just think that's a route that I could definitely see Mike Brown going down, and ultimately I expect him to more often than not. For the Lakers, I'm going to say that LeBron James averages double-digit assists for just the second time in his career. Last time he did it was 2020 when the Lakers won the championship, 10.2. But this past year, he averaged just over 8. I'm kind of expecting this Luka Doncic revenge tour. I think he's going to be out there scoring a bunch. The ball is going to be in his hands a lot, so that might make it kind of difficult for LeBron to get those assist numbers up. But I think especially, he's not going to decline in any big way this season. I don't think anybody's expecting that ever really at this point with LeBron James until he's 58 years old. But I think there's a world where he kind of tries to take it easy a little bit in the regular season, maybe more so puts an effort on the defensive end because they're going to need it, doesn't try to score as much, maybe rather just does the playmaking, leaves the scoring to Luka. It feels like there is a type of perfect storm here for LeBron to put up one of his highest career assist totals in a season. I think also having a more reliable big, even if he's nowhere near perfect, with DeAndre Ayton is going to give him some lob opportunities, just a guy he can go ahead and dump it off to. Yeah, give me LeBron 10 plus assists. Why not? For the Magic, I'm just going to say it. Franz Wagner shoots 35% or better from 3. He's got to fix the jumper at some point. There's no way the guy that we saw start his career with a semi-reliable 3 ball is just gone. I've seen a couple of workout clips, and buying into workout clips is a horrific decision in the offseason. Everybody has them. 99% of the time, they mean absolutely nothing. But the shot looks a little bit better, and I just can't believe that he just can't shoot the basketball whatsoever. So I'm going to say this is the season. Desmond Bane gives him a little bit more spacing. Jalen Suggs, Paolo Banchero, those guys, kind of get in a rhythm. The team is much better shooting the basketball. It opens the floor up for Franz. He's not having to pull more contested threes, and it leads to him shooting a better percentage. He gets in rhythm. And finally, we get decent three-point shooting Franz Wagner back from the beginning of his career. For the Dallas Mavericks, I'm going to say that they are a top 5 defense and a bottom 10 offense. I've talked about this a ton here on the channel over this summer, how I just don't trust them offensively with no Kyrie Irving, with a lot of front court depth that can't really shoot the basketball, with D'Lo being their lead ball handler. But defensively, I do think they're going to be ridiculous. I probably could have even put top 3 defense here, and I'd still feel confident in it. Just having AD and Cooper Flagg and Derek Lively and PJ Washington and Najee Marshall. Klay Thompson's nowhere near a great defender anymore, but he can hold up in moments, and Max Christie. It's a really good defensive team. This team is going to stifle a lot of squads, and part of that is just, they're going to close out a bunch of possessions on the defensive glass. They're not going to allow a lot of second chance opportunities because they're just such a big team to deal with on the boards. So yeah, I feel like they're a lock for a top 5 defense, maybe even more realistically top 3 defense. But I just think this offense is going to be a real struggle for them. For the Brooklyn Nets, I'm going to say that Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Thomas combined for 47 plus points per game. For reference, Cam Thomas this past season put up 24. Michael Porter Jr. put up 18.2, putting them at 42.2. So there's going to have to be a jump here, whether it's MPJ getting up to 23 in this bigger role, or Cam Thomas just shooting even more, trying to prove himself and say, hey, I am worthy of the contract that the Nets are currently not giving him. And he goes out there and puts up 27, and MPJ gets up to 20. Some combination of those things. The Nets drafted 3 point guards. It's not a team with really any real scoring options outside of these 2 guys. So yeah, let's just say they put up a million shots, both of them average over 20, kind of around the mid-20s, and they get close to a combined 50 plus points per game, while the Nets win 18 times this season. For the Nuggets, I'm going to say that De'Ron Holmes replaces Valanciunas as the main backup big by the end of the season. I was really high on him going to the draft. I'm still excited about him. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. I just think he gives them a very different, diverse look from what Jokic brings to the table as a more athletic, rim running type of big who I think could play with Jokic, who could be really successful in the playoffs, being an athletic guy, someone that can block shots. I just think Jonas, last time we saw him in the playoffs with the Pelicans, just got ran off the court by the Thunder. He just didn't really belong out there. I think there's a similar issue they could run into against the best teams in the West with Jonas Valanciunas that they really won't with DeRon Holmes as much. Maybe I'm being naive about a player who really is in his rookie season now because he missed all of last year with injury, but I don't know. Was a big believer in him. I'm going to continue to be a big believer, and I just think he gives them something that the Nuggets don't really have, whereas with Valanciunas, it just feels like a way lesser version of what Jokic already brings to the table. For the Pacers, I'm going to say that James Wiseman becomes their somewhat consistent starting big. Let me just go ahead and buy into James Wiseman hype. Why not? His stock is at an all-time low. He got injured last season for the millionth time, missed almost all of last year. Coming into this season, fingers crossed he's able to stay out there. He's playing somewhat reliably. I just hope the Pacers give him a chance. What other, season are you going to have this opportunity for a former second overall pick to get some run with you in a year where you would love to compete for a finals, but realistically, with no Halliburton, you're just not going to get there. So it's going to be Jay Huff, it's going to be Isaiah Jackson, and hopefully a good dosage of James Wiseman. And I'm going to say by the end of the season, whether it's just because they want to give him reps and they want to see what they have in him, or if they're just trying to tank at the end of the year, he is starting a good number of games for the Indiana Pacers. For the Pelicans, much like the Clippers, if you want to go bold, predict health. I'm going to say that Zion plays 65 plus games. Doesn't sound like he's hurt coming into the season from what we know. At the end of last year, he was in pretty good shape, it seemed like. I'm going to say he plays a bunch of games. Is that going to matter? I don't really know because DeJounte Murray is going to miss a majority of the season. The rest of the team is injury prone, but I'm going to say, like with the Clippers, they at least get Zion on the court, and I hope that's the case because I want the Pelicans to have an opportunity to evaluate this team and realize, is it going to work or not? So they're not just in this very odd middle ground that they're in at the moment, where I really don't know what direction they're even leaning towards. For the Pistons, I'm going to say that Cade Cunningham is top 3 in total triple-doubles this season. This past year, he had 9 on the season, tied for 5th with Josh Hart, only behind Sabonis, LeBron, Giannis, and Nikola Jokic. I think those guys are all, again, going to be towards the top. Same with like a Luka Doncic, for example. But I think Cade's going to put up more. I think he's going to have double-digit triple-doubles with Jaden Ivey back. I think he's going to have more room to play make. I think rebounding is going to continue to be a strength as this bigger guard. Obviously, he's going to score double-digit points. I think Cade's going to have an even better year built off the momentum from last season. And ultimately, he's going to be one of the league's top triple-double getters as the Pistons try and make a push further up the standings. For the Raptors, I'm going to say that there are 6 players who average 15 or more points per game. Last season, they had 3. RJ, Scotty Barnes, and Emmanuel Quickley. Then you had Jakob Poeltl and Grady Dick, both with about 14.5. That's pretty close to 15 right there. And then Brandon Ingram, I think also is going to join those 5 as the 6. I don't think anybody's going to score more than like 21 a game because no one on this team is like this super dominant scorer. A lot of guys can put the ball in the basket, like Ingram obviously is proven at that. Scotty Barnes has made some strides. RJ Barrett had a really solid scoring season last year as well. But there's no one out there that's going to put up 26, 27. They don't have a top 1A option in the league like a lot of other squads do. So I feel like they're going to make this system more so be a kind of a team effort. It's not going to be, give it to one guy and go let him cook. It's going to be a very spread out, even offense that leads to 6 guys, averaging 15 plus. For the Rockets, I'm going to say that Amen Thompson is second on the team in scoring. Last year, he finished tied for 3rd with Fred VanVleet behind Jalen Green and Şengün. I think Kevin Durant's going to be number 1, and Şengün was 5 points ahead of Amen last year. So it's a big gap to make up, but I think the Kevin Durant, Dorian Finney-Smith type of acquisitions benefit Amen Thompson a little bit more than Şengün. Not that it's not going to help Şengün, obviously it's going to, but I think having these extra perimeter threats and opening up the court is just going to make life so much easier for Amen Thompson to get his in the half court or be left wide open in the corner because no one respects his 3 ball, which is going to allow him to just dive in, make a great cut, finish at the rim or catch a lob, things like that. I just think all the extra added attention on other guys is going to allow Amen to get forgotten sometimes. And it's going to lead to him having a much better scoring season this year and put him second in points per game for the Rockets. For the Spurs, I'm going to say that Victor Wembanyama finishes in the top 5 in total threes made this season. That might sound insane, but a lot of you probably remember he was putting up a million of them last year, and he really started to knock them down at a high clip right before his season ended, and that ultimately led to Victor Wembanyama finishing last season with 142 made threes, the 69th most made in the league last season over 46 games. If we put that out over an 82 game sample size, that would have ultimately put him at 253 made, which would have had him 6th, right behind Peyton Pritchard in 5th place. So, Wemby's going to have to play a lot more games. He's going to have to maintain that pace. Like, it's asking a lot, but I think there's a world where he shoots a lot better, continues to shoot at a ridiculous clip, being set up now by De'Aaron Fox having a much better scoring option to play off of. Wemby's taking these massive steps forward. Why not take another big one? And in addition to probably winning Defensive Player of the Year and leading the league in blocks, finishing top 5 in threes made. For the Phoenix Suns, I'm going to say they finished as the worst defense in the NBA this season. Last year, they were bottom 4, only ahead of the Wizards, Pelicans, and Utah Jazz. Not great company to be in. And Kevin Durant was one of their more reliable defenders. Sure, they add some size with Mark Williams and Kaman Maluach and Matt Ishbia saying that the new Phoenix identity is gritty, hard-nosed basketball. I just don't think that's going to be the case. I think this team is going to let up a lot of points. They're going to bleed points to the opposing teams. They're going to get run out of the gym a lot of nights. And ultimately, they might be kind of fun on offense with Jalen Green and Devin Booker in that backcourt and some interesting bigs. But I think their defense is abysmal, going to be the worst in the NBA. For the Oklahoma City Thunder, I'm going to say that Chet Holmgren is an all-NBA player next season. I don't even feel like that's that bold, but I'm sure some people do, because I don't think people realize how good Chet Holmgren is. Last year, before the injury that derailed him majority of his season, he was putting up a very efficient just under 20 points per game, blocking almost 4 shots a night. He looked like a monster, and I think this season, now that he's got an off season to kind of get back to that type of level, he's going to have another ridiculous start to the year. It's going to continue. If he can play enough games, I think he's going to be in DPOY conversations. Not sure if he's going to catch up to Wemby, but the Thunder, again, going to be a historic defense anchored by him primarily, blocking like 3 shots a night, shooting a lot better from 3, putting up nearly 20 points per game. Like, that seems like the most obvious recipe to an all-NBA player that I could possibly imagine, especially when you add in the Thunder likely winning around 60 games again. For the Timberwolves, I'm going to say that Terrence Shannon averages 11 plus points per game next year. That would be a big jump from his 4.3 that he averaged this past season, but he only played 32 games, averaged less than 11 minutes. I think he's going to pretty firmly step into the Nickeil Alexander-Walker role, play around 25 minutes a night, and whenever he got opportunity, Terrence Shannon was really good. He's really good attacking downhill, had some big threes in the playoffs. I remember a few against Oklahoma City, a great transition player. He just feels like he's always in the right spot, and I think this is a team that needs players like him. So yeah, let me say Terrence Shannon Jr. like 11.2 points per game in MIP talks, and one of the more reliable role players on this Minnesota squad. For the Portland Trailblazers, I'm going to say that Scoot Henderson gets an MIP talks. I have not sold my Scoot stock. I was really high on him. It's not really worked out in my favor so far, but there are some real bright spots last season, and I still want to believe that Scoot has all this talent in the tank. The flashes have been there. The Blazers team around him now is better than it's ever been. There is real talent on this roster to support him, from to play make to open up the court. I'm going to believe in Scoot Henderson. I don't think he wins MIP. If Scoot continues to not really meet his potential for like 5-6 more seasons and then takes a leap, then sure, we can discuss it. But yeah, well, I don't think he's going to win it. I think at the very least, he's going to have by far the best season of his career, is going to showcase a lot of the potential that made him so highly touted going into the draft, and he's going to be in those discussions at the very least. For the Warriors, I'm going to say that Jonathan Kuminga is with the team next season, but still doesn't play much, because he can't play. We've seen with Jimmy Butler, with Draymond Green. Right now, they're holding him hostage. He does not want to be there, but they are just refusing to trade him and upgrade the team, like getting back on Malik Monk or something. I don't know. I'm so sick of the Jonathan Kuminga situation. I've lightly ranted about it here on the channel. I will not do that here now. I'm already tempted to, but I've done it on TikTok if you want to see my thoughts, and on Twitter, because it's like the only thing that's happening right now is daily non-updates about Jonathan Kuminga. So yeah, I'm just going to say he ends up staying with the Warriors next season because they won't let him leave. Like, they're physically preventing him from going anywhere else at the moment due to restricted free agency, but that because he can't play with Draymond and Jimmy Butler, like, the fit just doesn't make sense. He still doesn't play. And finally, for the Washington Wizards, I'm going to say they're in playing contention. I think they'll probably end up as like the 14 seed, but I don't think there's that big of a gap between them and some of the other teams in kind of that play-in range. I just think the Wizards are going to be somewhat competitive this season. There's a lot of young talent I really like. I think having the veterans makes them a little bit scrappier than people are going to realize. Like, there's no reason for CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton to not try. Like, they want to, earn contracts in other places after Washington or build up their value enough to probably get traded to real legitimate contending or at least competitive teams. So yeah, I think this is a team that's going to be somewhat competitive, not great by any means, but they'll be kind of scrappy. They'll get some interesting wins. They'll be closer to that play-in range, at least for majority of the season, before they eventually probably bottom out at the end of the year like they should, than I think some people realize. Well, with all that being said, that is my bold prediction for all 30 NBA teams. Again, let me know the thoughts on your team's bold prediction. Let me know down below in the comments what yours is for your team or any one of these teams across the association. Again, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Helps the channel out a ton. I appreciate you watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.